A young mother sits in a hospital waiting room, tears streaming down her face. Her 3-year-old daughter has just been diagnosed with leukemia. In this raw moment of pain, she looks up at the ceiling and asks, why? Why my child? Why this suffering? How many of you have had moments like these? Moments where the weight of life's challenges feels unbearable. When the very fabric of your existence seems to be unraveling before your eyes. Pauses and looks around the room. That mother was Sarah Mitchell from Detroit. I met her in 2012, and what she taught me about suffering and meaning would forever change my perspective on life's greatest challenges. You see, Sarah didn't know it then, but her daughter's illness would become the catalyst for a movement that would help thousands of families facing similar battles. But before I tell you how Sarah's story ends, let's talk about why we're all here today. We're here because each of us carries our own burden of suffering. Maybe it's not as dramatic as a child's illness. Perhaps it's the quiet desperation of feeling stuck in a job that slowly drains your soul, or the crushing loneliness of losing someone you love. Or maybe it's the constant anxiety that whispers, you're not good enough. Walks closer to the audience. You know what fascinates me? We spend so much of our lives trying to avoid suffering. We've created entire industries dedicated to eliminating discomfort. We pop pills for instant relief. We scroll through social media to escape our thoughts. We chase success, money, and recognition, believing they'll shield us from pain. But here's the truth that most self-help gurus won't tell you. The path to a meaningful life doesn't run away from suffering. It runs straight through it. Pauses for effect. The path to a meaningful life runs straight through suffering. Think about the most profound moments of growth in your life. When did they happen? Was it when everything was perfect? When you were comfortable? When life was easy? Or did they happen when you were challenged? When you were pushed to your limits? When you were forced to confront your deepest fears? I remember speaking with Viktor, an 82-year-old Holocaust survivor back in 2014. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, Wayne, in Auschwitz, I discovered that everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. This man, who had endured unimaginable suffering, didn't just survive. He found meaning in his suffering. He went on to help countless others process their trauma, turning his pain into purpose. Walks to another part of the stage. Now, I'm not suggesting we should seek out suffering. Life will provide plenty of opportunities for that on its own. What I'm suggesting is something far more revolutionary, that we need to change our relationship with suffering. You see, most of us have been programmed to believe that suffering is inherently bad, that it's something to be eliminated at all costs. But what if, and this is a big what if suffering is actually the cocoon from which our greatest self emerges? Think about the butterfly. What happens in that cocoon isn't pretty. The caterpillar literally dissolves into a soup of cells before reforming into something new. It's a process of complete destruction before reconstruction. Nature teaches us that transformation requires disruption, makes eye contact with different audience members. What are you running from right now? What pain are you trying to numb? What challenge are you trying to avoid? Take a moment, really think about it. Because here's what I've learned after decades of studying human potential. The very thing you're running from might be the very thing that's trying to wake you up. Remember Sarah, the mother I mentioned earlier, her story didn't end in that hospital waiting room. As she sat with her suffering, something began to shift. She started connecting with other parents in the pediatric oncology ward. She noticed how isolated and overwhelmed they felt, how the medical bills were crushing them, how they needed someone to talk to who really understood. So she started a support group. Just a small circle of parents sharing their fears, their hopes, their daily struggles. That group grew into a network, and that network became a foundation. Today, the Mitchell Foundation provides financial and emotional support to hundreds of families dealing with childhood cancer. Sarah often tells me, if you had told me in that waiting room that my daughter's illness would lead to all this, I wouldn't have believed you. But now I understand that without that suffering, I never would have found my purpose. Pauses and speaks more softly. It's not the enemy of meaning. It's the birthplace of meaning. When we suffer, we're forced to confront the fundamental questions of existence. Why am I here? What matters most? What am I willing to fight for? These aren't comfortable questions. They're not meant to be. They're meant to shake us awake, to force us out of our comfortable numbness and into the full experience of being alive. Voice becomes more passionate. I'm not talking about martyrdom here. I'm not suggesting you should suffer needlessly or glorify pain for pain's sake. What I'm talking about is developing the courage to stay present with your suffering long enough to let it teach you what you need to learn. Here's the paradox. The more you try to avoid suffering, the more you suffer, the more you resist pain, the more it persists. But when you learn to embrace it, not in a masochistic way, but with curiosity and openness, something magical happens. The suffering begins to transform. It's like what happened to my friend David back in 2010. He was a successful executive who lost everything in the financial crash. His house, his savings, his identity, all gone. He fell into a deep depression. But instead of running from his pain, he did something remarkable. He sat with it. He allowed himself to feel the full weight of his loss. And in that darkness, he found something unexpected: clarity. He realized that his entire sense of self-worth had been built on external achievements. His suffering stripped away these false identities and forced him to confront who he really was beneath all the titles and possessions. Walks thoughtfully across the stage. Today, David runs a mentoring program for at-risk youth. He says he's never felt more fulfilled. I had to lose everything to find what I was really meant to do, he told me. My suffering wasn't a punishment. It was a redirect. Your suffering has purpose. Your pain has meaning. But you'll never discover that meaning if you're constantly running from the discomfort. Pauses and looks intently at the audience. Think about the times in your life when you've grown the most. I bet they weren't the easy times. They were the times that challenged you, that forced you to dig deep, that made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. That's wisdom trying to emerge through the cracks in your comfortable existence. Voice becomes softer, more intimate. I want you to try something with me right now. Close your eyes for a moment. Think about the biggest challenge you're facing in your life right now. Feel the weight of it. Notice your instinct to push it away, to solve it, to make it disappear. Now, just for a moment, I want you to imagine welcoming this challenge like you'd welcome an old friend. Not because you enjoy it, but because you trust that it has something to teach you. What might this difficulty be trying to show you about yourself? What strength might it be trying to develop in you? What wisdom might be trying to emerge through this crack in your life? Let me share something remarkable with you from my years of research and observation. Every great spiritual tradition, every profound philosophy, every lasting wisdom teaching tells us the same truth. Transformation comes through tribulation, not around it, not despite it, through it. You know what's fascinating? Modern psychology is finally catching up to what ancient wisdom has always known. They call it post-traumatic growth, but I prefer simpler terms. I call it becoming who you're meant to be through facing what you're afraid. Consider Maria, a woman I met during a seminar in Chicago in 2013. She had spent 20 years building a successful career in advertising. Everything looked perfect on the outside, the corner office, the prestigious awards, the enviable lifestyle. But inside, she felt hollow, empty, like she was living someone else's life. And then came what she calls her beautiful breakdown. Her body simply refused to continue. Panic attacks, insomnia, complete exhaustion. Her carefully constructed world came crashing down. And in the ruins of that collapse, she found something. Today, Maria runs art therapy programs for troubled teens. She earns a fraction of her former salary, but her eyes light up when she talks about her work. I had to break down, she tells her students, to break through to who I really am. This is what suffering offers us, the gift of authenticity. When we're comfortable, it's easy to wear masks, to play roles, to pretend, but suffering strips away our pretenses. It forces us to confront our true selves. What mask are you wearing right now? What roles are you playing that don't align with your soul's purpose? Sometimes the suffering we experience is simply our authentic self trying to break free from the prison of our pretenses. You see, there's a profound difference between changing your life and transforming your life. Change is external. New job, new relationship, new address. Transformation is internal. New perspective, new understanding, new relationship with yourself. And transformation rarely happens when we're comfortable. I witnessed this truth through my friend Robert's journey. In 2008, he was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. The prognosis was grim, but instead of letting his diagnosis define him, he allowed it to refine him. He told me, Wayne, before cancer, I was existing. Now I'm living. Robert didn't just survive cancer. He used it as a catalyst to revolutionize his life. He left his soul-crushing corporate job to start a nonprofit helping cancer patients navigate their journey. He repaired broken relations. He started writing poetry. He began really living. Suffering isn't just something to endure. It's an invitation to evolve. Every crisis contains within it the seeds of opportunity. Every breakdown has the potential for breakthrough. Every wound can become a source of wisdom. But here's the crucial part. This transformation doesn't happen automatically. It happens through conscious choice. It happens when we stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? Let me share a powerful truth that changed my entire perspective on suffering. Everything, every challenge, every setback, every loss is either an opportunity for growth or an excuse for stagnation. The choice is always yours. Think about a tree for a moment. Do you know when a tree develops its deepest roots? During storms, when fierce winds blow, the tree is forced to develop stronger roots or be blown over. Your challenges or your storms, they're not punishments. They're opportunities to develop deeper roots. I remember counseling a couple, Tom and Lisa, in 2014. Their marriage was falling apart after Tom's infidelity. The pain was raw, the trust shattered. Many couples would have walked away, but they made a different choice. They chose to use their crisis as a catalyst for creating a deeper connection. They didn't just patch things up. They completely reimagined what their relationship could be. They developed new levels of honesty, new depths of intimacy, new capacities for forgiveness. Today, they counsel other couples in crisis, sharing how their deepest wound became their greatest gift. This is what I mean when I talk about embracing suffering. It's not about becoming a martyr or glorifying pain. It's about developing the wisdom to see that our challenges aren't happening to us. They're happening for us. Consider the word suffering itself. In Latin, it comes from suffer, which means to bear under, to carry, to endure, but also to allow. There's profound wisdom in this etymology. Suffering isn't just about bearing pain, it's about allowing. Think about the times in your life when you've experienced the most profound growth. Was it when everything was easy, or was it when you were challenged to your core? When you were forced to question everything you thought you knew? Let me introduce you to James, a recovering addict I worked with in 2011. He told me something profound. My addiction wasn't my problem. It was my attempt to escape from my problems. My recovery began when I finally had the courage to face what I was running from. Often what we call suffering is really resistance to what is. We suffer not because of what's happening, but because we're fighting against what's happening. We're using all our energy to deny reality instead of using that energy to grow through reality. This is why acceptance is so crucial. Not passive resignation, but active acceptance. The kind of acceptance that says, this is what is. Now, what can I learn from it? How can I grow through it? How can I use this to become more of who I'm meant to be? Remember Sarah from the hospital waiting room? She told me something profound years later. She said, the hardest part wasn't my daughter's illness. The hardest part was fighting against reality, demanding that it be different. When I finally accepted what was happening, I found the strength to deal with it. When we stop fighting against it, when we stop trying to avoid it at all costs, when we learn to embrace it as a teacher rather than an enemy, that's when its transformative power is released. But let me be clear about something. Embracing suffering doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean accepting abuse or staying in toxic situations. Sometimes the wisdom that comes through suffering is precisely the wisdom to know when to fight, when to leave, when to say no more. The key is discernment. Learning to distinguish between the suffering that's trying to wake us up and the suffering that's trying to destroy us. Between the pain that's leading us toward growth and the pain that's leading us toward destruction. This discernment comes through developing what I call conscious suffering. This is suffering that we face with awareness, with presence, with a willingness to learn. It's suffering that we don't compound with judgment, resistance, or self-pity. Physical pain is your body's way of saying, pay attention. Something needs to change. Emotional suffering serves the same purpose. It's life's way of saying, wake up. Something needs to transform. Have you ever noticed how society teaches us to view suffering as some kind of mistake? As if a life well lived should be free from pain, free from challenges, free from difficulties. What a dangerous illusion this is. Let me tell you about Michael, a young athlete I met in 2009. He was training for the Olympics when a car accident shattered his dreams and his spine. In those early days after the accident, he was consumed by one question. What can I do with what happened to me? This shift in perspective changed everything. Today, Michael runs one of the most successful adaptive sports programs in the country, helping disabled veterans rediscover their strength through athletics. My injury wasn't the end of my story. He tells his athletes, it was the beginning of a better one. This is what happens when we stop fighting against our suffering and start working with it. You see, there's a fundamental truth that most people miss is meaning doesn't come from avoiding suffering. It comes from transforming suffering. It comes from taking our wounds and turning them into wisdom, taking our pain and turning it into purpose. Consider the Japanese art of kintsugi. When a ceramic bowl breaks, instead of throwing it away or hiding the cracks, artists repair it with gold. The result is a bowl that's more beautiful, more valuable because of its brokenness. Your life can be like that too. Each of you sitting here today has experienced brokenness. Maybe it's a broken heart, a broken dream, a broken spirit. What if, just what if, those breaks aren't meant to destroy you? What if they're meant to reconstruct you into something more beautiful? Let me share something profound that Rachel, a grief counselor, told me in 2013. She said, Wayne, people think grief is about loss. But really, grief is about transformation. It's about becoming someone new because the old you doesn't exist anymore. This is the hidden gift in suffering. Forces us to evolve. When everything's comfortable, we can stay the same. We can keep our old patterns, our old beliefs, our old ways of being. But suffering shakes us awake. It demands that we become more than we are. You know what's fascinating? Scientists have discovered that stress actually changes our brain chemistry. When we face challenges, our brains create new neural pathways. We literally become different people through our struggles. This transformation doesn't happen automatically. It happens through conscious choice. It happens when we choose to stay present with our pain instead of running from it. When we choose to learn from our difficulties instead of... Let me share a powerful practice with you. Whenever you're facing a challenge, ask yourself these three questions. What is this situation trying to teach me? What strength is this trying to develop in me? How can I use this experience to help others? These questions transform suffering from something that happens to you into something that happens for you. They turn pain into purpose. They turn challenges into opportunities. Remember Jessica? She lost her son to suicide in 2007. The pain was unbearable, but instead of letting it destroy her, she let it direct her. Today, she runs a suicide prevention program in schools, sharing her story to help others recognize the signs she missed. My suffering gave me my mission, she says. It showed me why I'm here. This is what can happen when we embrace our suffering instead of just. Now, let me be absolutely clear about something. This isn't about minimizing your pain. It's not about putting on a fake smile and pretending everything's fine. It's about finding meaning in your struggles without denying how much they hurt. Think about the metaphor of birth. Birth involves intense pain, but it's pain with a purpose. It's pain that brings new life into the world. What if your suffering is like that? What if it's the labor pains of a new you being born? You see, there's a profound difference between suffering without meaning and suffering with meaning. Suffering without meaning is just pain, but suffering with meaning is transformation. Let me tell you about Marcus, a former gang member I worked with in 2014. He spent 10 years in prison, but he calls those years his awakening. In the confined space of his cell, he found the freedom to reimagine his life. Prison didn't break me, he says, it broke open who I really am. Today, Marcus works with at-risk youth, using his story to show them a different path. His suffering became his testimony. His pain became his platform. This is what Viktor Frankl meant when he said that suffering ceases to be suffering when we find meaning in it. The pain doesn't necessarily go away, but it transforms from meaningless torture into meaningful challenge. Here's something powerful to consider. The Dyer wisdom tradition tells us that our greatest gift to the world often comes from our deepest wound. Think about that. What if your pain isn't just about you? What if it's preparation for how you're meant to serve others? Look at Linda, a successful executive I met in 2012. Her battle with depression felt like a curse. But through a healing journey, she discovered her true calling. Today, she's revolutionizing how companies handle mental health in the workplace. My depression taught me empathy, she says. It taught me how to listen. It taught me how to help others who are struggling. Her suffering didn't just transform her, it gave her the tools to transform her entire industry. You see, when we embrace our suffering, when we stop running from it and start learning from it, something miraculous happens. Our pain becomes our power. Our struggles become our strength. Our wounds become our wisdom. This transformation really happens in isolation. We need community. We need support. We need people who can hold space for our pain without trying to fix it. Think about a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. If you try to help it by cutting open the cocoon, you actually harm it. The butterfly needs the struggle of breaking free to strengthen its wings, but it also needs the cocoon to support it. That's what we need to. Support that doesn't rescue us from our struggles, but helps us grow through them. Support that doesn't try to fix our pain, but helps us find meaning in it. Remember this, your suffering is not a punishment. It's not a mistake. It's not a sign that you're doing life wrong. It's an invitation to become more than you are. It's a call to transformation. Let's talk about something that might surprise you. Did you know that the word crisis in Chinese is composed of two characters? One means danger, and the other means opportunity. This isn't just linguistic trivia, it's profound wisdom about. Consider Sandra's story from 2015. After 25 years of marriage, her husband suddenly left her for someone else. The pain was devastating. The betrayal felt unbearable. But in that crisis, she found both danger and opportunity. The danger was becoming bitter, letting her pain define her future. The opportunity was rediscovering who she was beyond being someone's wife. That crisis stripped everything away, she told me. And in that emptiness, I found myself. Today, Sandra leads workshops helping women rebuild their lives after divorce. Her suffering became her expertise. Her pain became her platform for helping others. You see, every crisis presents us with a choice. We can let it break us down, or we can let it break us open. Breaking down means collapsing under the weight of our suffering. Breaking open means allowing our suffering to crack open our hearts to greater wisdom, greater compassion, greater purpose. Let me share something profound that Dr. Thompson, a hospice physician, told me in 2011. He said, "Wayne, I've noticed something remarkable. The people who find peace at the end of life aren't the ones who had the easiest lives. They're the ones who found meaning in their difficulties." This is what we're really talking about when we speak of embracing suffering. We're talking about the courage to look our pain in the eye and ask, what are you here to teach me? We're talking about the wisdom to understand that our wounds, if we let them, can become doorways to deeper understanding. Think about Thomas Edison's response when his laboratory burned down in 1914, destroying years of work. He said, all our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew. That's not positive thinking, that's transformative thinking. It's the ability to see opportunity in disaster, meaning in misfortune, finding meaning in suffering. Doesn't mean pretending it doesn't hurt. It means allowing the pain to change you in ways that make you more fully human, more deeply alive, more authentically yourself. Consider the story of Angela, a teacher I met in 2013. She lost her daughter to cancer at the age of 8. The pain was immeasurable, but through her grief, she discovered something profound. She realized that her daughter's short life had taught her more about love, presence, and courage than all her years of formal education. Today, Angela has transformed her classroom into a sanctuary of emotional intelligence. She teaches her students not just academic subjects, but how to face life's challenges with grace and courage. Her suffering didn't diminish her, it didn't break her. It broke her open to a greater capacity for love and understanding. It's not the opposite of joy. It's often the pathway to a deeper, more authentic joy. Not the superficial happiness that comes from getting what we want, but the profound joy that comes from becoming who we're meant to be. Let me tell you about Richard, a businessman I counseled in 2008. He had achieved everything society told him would make him happy: wealth, status, power. But he was profoundly unhappy. It wasn't until he lost everything in the financial crisis that he found what he was really looking for: purpose. My success was my suffering, he told me. I was so busy achieving that I forgot about living. Today, Richard runs a mentoring program helping young entrepreneurs build businesses that serve a higher purpose than just profit. His crisis became his calling. You see, there's a kind of suffering that comes from living too small, from playing it safe, from refusing to answer life's call to growth. Sometimes what we call depression or anxiety is really our soul's protest against the cage we build around ourselves. Think about a seed for a moment. For the seed to become a tree, it must break open. It must surrender its form as a seed. From the seed's perspective, this breaking open might feel like dying. But from life's perspective, it's the beginning of something magnificent. Your suffering might be like that seed breaking open. It might feel like everything's falling apart, but perhaps everything's really falling into place. Perhaps what feels like destruction is really transformation. Let me share something powerful. Sarah, a trauma therapist, told me in 2014, our nervous system can't tell the difference between the pain of growth and the pain of destruction. That's why we need wisdom to guide us through our suffering. This wisdom comes from understanding that not all pain is the same. There's the pain of resistance, fighting against what is. There's the pain of avoidance, running from what we need to face. And there's the pain of transformation, allowing ourselves to be changed by our experience. Consider Martha's story. She spent years in an abusive relationship, afraid to leave because she feared being alone. The pain of staying was familiar. The pain of leaving was unknown. But when she finally found the courage to leave, she discovered something remarkable. The pain of transformation, though intense, had purpose. It was leading her toward freedom, toward selfhood, toward life. Today, Martha helps other women find their courage. Sometimes, she says, we need to let our old life break down completely before we can build the life we're meant to live. This is what embracing suffering really means. It means trusting that our pain, when faced with courage and wisdom, can lead us toward our purpose. It means understanding that our wounds, when transformed by love and understanding, can become our gifts to the world. Look at David, a recovered addict I worked with in 2012. He told me my addiction brought me to my knees. But from my knees, I learned to pray. From my knees, I learned humility. From my knees, I learned that rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. What seems like our greatest curse can become our greatest blessing. What feels like our deepest wound can become our most powerful medicine for others. What appears to be breaking us down might actually be breaking us open to who we're meant to become. But remember, this transformation isn't a destination. It's a journey. Each challenge, each setback, each loss is an invitation to grow, to learn, to become more than we are. The question isn't whether we'll face suffering, we will. The question is, what will allow our suffering to make of us?